It's a little bit controversial. People say you don't need programming language to start out. Some people say you do. What would you say is the right path for someone looking to break into the field?
If you really want to set yourself apart, it makes sense to have some programming skills. Having some small projects in a GitHub that you could show somebody in an interview just to say, I've done these things, build my own tool that does the same thing as this other thing, but it's all mine and proprietary. There is this term script kiddie for a reason. It's because there are going to be people who just don't care.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the MRE Security YouTube channel. My name is Evan Isaac, and I'm a 3-year offensive security consultant, mainly focuses on web application security as well as API security. Today, we have Evan Hosinski on the podcast, where we'll be discussing programming. Do you need to learn programming for cybersecurity and his journey breaking into the cybersecurity field? Let's bring out Evan Hosinski. Hey, Evan, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So you and I first started out at a small firm, and we slowly branched out into 2 separate firms. Can you give a little bit of background about yourself?
Yeah. So I actually didn't start in cybersecurity at all. So I actually started in digital forensic space as far as the, I guess, like the defense or offense side. Before that, even I was in a SOC, but that wasn't my favorite thing. But yeah, so I basically started in digital forensics. I really liked digital forensics, but I knew I wanted to do offensive security. The entire time I was doing that work, I was also in a master's program, doing a lot of programming, a lot of different languages at the time. And then I had been programming before that for a little while and tutoring as well. So just a lot of different programming things and a lot of foundational building skills and learning different design patterns and things. And I was trying to figure out what I can do with this and how I can use that to leverage myself into offensive security. So then I got a interview at a Big Four firm, and they loved my programming experience. And I think the big thing that really helped me, and I think the big thing that the main reason I think programming is so valid and so helpful is because I could speak to a low level on why something might work, even if I didn't totally understand from an offensive perspective how to attack it. I could say this is why it's vulnerable. And so that kind of like led me into that world. And so I was immediately hired. My first job in offensive security was as a senior. So it was kind of like put up or shut up kind of situation where you're throwing your first engagement and you have a junior under you and you have no idea what you're doing, but you have the ability to figure it out. So I could definitely say like my first few engagements, there's a lot of nerves to shake off. Definitely wasn't as good then as I am now. And I think that's true for everybody. But I think the bigger difference for me at that point was I was kind of learning how to do it. I was a master's student at the time. And then I was trying to figure out like, how can I take what I know about defense and what I know about programming and convert that into something that might actually help me in this field. Did that for a lot of time, and I spent most of my time just trying to develop tools, which I think is a big joke among all of us and all of our friends is I like to reinvent the wheel. And I think the reason I like to do that is because I learn a lot when I do it. That's what kind of helped me understand Active Directory. That's kind of what helped me understand like attacking and payload delivery systems. And it's kind of what gave me my interests as well. So on top of that, at the time, nobody likes phishing. So they were like, hey, we also want you to do phishing because nobody else wants to do it. So good luck. And I said, what tools do we have? And they said, we have no tools. I was like, that's awesome. I love that. So then I had to fail a lot at phishing before I started to understand like what makes a phish fail, what makes delivery fail, what makes your landing page fail, what kind of things am I looking out for? This is before Google came out with their DMARC requirements and things like that. DMARC was important at the time, but not as important. And so from there, again, like went back to my programming skills. How can I use my programming skills to make this work for me, to make these more successful? So I built a CLI tool that I deemed Fogo at the time. It was entirely written in Go. So I also just picked up an entirely new language to do it because I was really tired of Python. I can't stand Python. I use it. I just can't stand it. And so I used that tool, and the firm was using the tool for a while. And then when I left, I took it with me, and they tried to come back and be like, give me my tool back. And I said, you can have it if you can use it and program it. And then they all looked at each other and were like, we don't know how to write Go, and nobody on the team was trying to write Go, so you can have it. So that's kind of where that tool came from. Took that with me over to the small firm that we talked about before, and it's been progressively built over like a 5-6 year period. I really enjoy working that tool. It teaches me quite a bit. And yeah, so I mean, that's a very long tangent, but that's how I got into the space. That's how I got to where we met, and that's where I found my niches. I really work on a lot of phishing. I work on a lot of internal assessments, and I really like payload delivery systems is one of my favorite things, not just as far as phishing, but just in general, being able to put something on a computer that wasn't there before.
Do you do any red teaming?
Yes and no. So I also work with BAS systems. And so that's given me a lot of advantages. So BAS being breach and attack sims. And so part of that is being able to put the little binary on the system to show them like that it's doing stuff in the background. And so I would say from a red team perspective, I feel like trying to get a client to put a binary on disk is such a red team in itself because they don't know what they're doing, or, Marco the web will get on there and they can't get the disk on there. They can't get it on there. So you start pulling out your hat and either putting it up in the cloud in the GNS record and pulling it down, or you send it to them like an encrypted email and have it run from like a CS proj file, something special just to get the binary running. So while I say I have done a lot less red teams, I think people really enjoy having me in the tool belt for red teams because I have a lot of different ways of getting something on the system. It's not just like I tried one thing and I'm done. I'll find a way to get it there.
Definitely. Yeah. I know that when you and I first started talking, I was very into Python. You started to move away from Python, going into Go, and it turned into you bashing Python a whole bunch. Yeah, you
It
kept
sure
telling me,
did.
why don't you just learn Go? And then I would try to learn Go, and it's like, I don't even know where to start with this thing because of pointers and references and all this other stuff. So I'm assuming your take is still the same. Stick with Go or stick with a lower level language to get started.
Yeah, I think Python is important if you want to get something done quickly. You can't bash it too much because that's where all of the offensive libraries live. Nobody can get away from using, byte bleeder tools or from using NXC now, I guess. And both of those are written in Python. Under the hood, it's just using C is all I'm going to say. But at the end of the day, like that's where it all lives right now, and that's because nobody else was willing to build it. So I have gone out of my way, and on the side, on top of my other million projects, I'm building an Active Directory library for Golang because I'm trying to get rid of that problem. Because I think Golang is such a better language for everything that NXC and CME does. It's just inherently faster. It's way better at handling more threads. It's just, in my opinion, it's better all around. It doesn't have to be Go. You can get away with using Python. I honestly, I give people props for just knowing how to program in general and being in this position, this field. To me, it means that you want to learn a little bit more. You want to have an understanding of what you're doing, and you're not just pressing buttons. So that's
I
why I
agree.
have those requirements. But I think even teaching you like you do API and web apps, and I'm like, have you ever built one? You're like, well, I mean, I like kind of, and so like kind of helping you through that process and you being from the other side, you can see now on the defense side, like it's really important to do these things. And so you get on these calls with clients and they ask you questions, which they inevitably do. You can tell them how to fix it and why it's vulnerable, and in a way that a lot of people who can't program can't do that.
Totally. Yeah, when I first started out, I was a web developer. Didn't really do much of the back end. That's when I was learning it, and then my computer crashed, so I didn't really get the chance to learn the back end fundamentals or how backends really work. So it's important for a web app security professional. You should know how to do back end. I did a little bit with Python, Flask, and Django. Did a little bit with that. Got a note-taking application set up, and then I tested my own application, and I realized I was vulnerable to XSS, SQLI, as well as IDOR attacks. So it's super easy to get vulnerabilities within your web apps, which I thought was crazy. I was always saying, hey, why do developers always have these kind of vulnerabilities? Until I made my own application. And then I said, oh my God, even I did it. And I'm a security professional. I should know how to do filtering. I should know authorization techniques and stuff like that. I still had trouble with it. This actually happens. Like, this is the real world. So when it comes to cybersecurity, it's a little bit controversial. A lot of people say you don't need programming language to start out. Some people say you do. What would you say is the right path for someone looking to break into the field?
I think in modern day, if you really want to set yourself apart, it makes sense to have some programming skills. And you don't have to be a master. You don't have to be amazing at them, but just kind of showing that you want the extra mile to do this. Having some small projects in a GitHub that you could show somebody in an interview just to say, like, I've done these things. I've, built my own tool that does the same thing as this other thing, but it's all mine and proprietary. I've had people on interviews ask me if I have my own tools, and I've had them go and check those tools because my Git lives in my house, so I know exactly who visits my websites, or when they do it. I guess is the bare minimum. And so I really do think it sets you apart. And I know currently in this cyber landscape, it's a little difficult to find a job. So anything you can do to set yourself apart from somebody else is going to be helpful. There's this term script kiddie for a reason. It's because there are going to be people who just don't care about it, and sometimes they're better at you than finding things in the environment. But at the end of the day, that I think those are two different skill sets that you can flex muscle on. I personally think if you try to get into the field and you don't program, you're not doing yourself any favors.
Originally, when I first broke into the field, I said programming was not really useful whatsoever. And then as I started to do pen tests, as I started to learn more about the field, I realized it is important. You should know how some of this stuff works. You should know how to build out your own tools, how to script things. So definitely learn programming. I think it's extremely important. But would you say it's best to learn, let's say, Java and Go before learning Python? Or would you say Python comes first and then learn Java and Go?
Hey, I mean, I had learned mostly Java up until I got to my master's. And my master's, I was supposed to take a prereq that was a Python class. So I think historically, colleges and everybody try to put you on Python first. I think it teaches you bad habits. It's weakly typed. Well, not weakly typed. You don't have to declare your variables. You can at runtime, it'll figure out what's going to be in that place. And I think it teaches you bad habits because most other languages don't do that. Also, can't stand the indentation thing, but that's my own personal preference. But I do think like you should learn Python if you're going to get into offensive security because that's where 80% of the tools live. You should learn Python also because when you start using tools that are new and you have no idea what they're doing, and you find out that 3 days after you did a test and you got all these credentials with this tool, it sent it to somebody else's cloud because you didn't read the repo library. Like that's on you, right? Like you can figure those things out. If you know how to read Python, you can say, why is this making a GET request to something I didn't tell it to do, that kind of thing. So I think it also puts the onus on you when you go on these tests and you start using new tools. If you can read programming language and you can read source code, it helps you quite a bit. So I think Python is going to be crucial, unfortunately, even though I don't want to say it. And then just pick a low level code, or pick a object oriented code, pick something different to kind of flex that muscle and go between the both of them. I mean, I program in at this point, it's close to 12 low level, high level HTML slash database languages. I think it's closer to 14 now. And it's at some point it becomes syntax. And that's why I say do more than one, because you'll start to realize that they're all very similar. They just ask you to do it in different ways.
Yeah, I don't know if I can learn 14
You don't
languages.
need to. You don't
Yeah,
need to.
I don't think so. I think the basics is Python. Yeah, I mean, I know Python. It will take me a minute to kind of understand and wrap my head around certain things with Python. And then Golang, you and I are currently trying to work something out as a side project, and I don't know what I'm doing. So that's pretty interesting that you say, kind of use both Python and Java. I thought for sure you're going to say, nope, just stick to Java and go. Don't even worry about Python. Yeah, you could totally figure that out on the side. But something that I think universities struggle with is giving some sort of example with cybersecurity and programming. I was in a cybersecurity course and they didn't really make us do a whole lot when it came to tool development. They didn't make us create, let's say, scans or something like that, TCP, UDP scans. So what would you say is a good first project that a user can do to, maybe begin their journey in learning Python or learning Go?
I guess it depends what you want to do. I think if you want to do web applications, you can do a fuzzer. If you want to do clouds, you could also do a similar thing. You could build your own fuzzer for clouds. That fuzzer could also include DNS and subdomain enumeration, that kind of thing. And then if you are more interested in internal networks, or that's a little less useful, you could build like a port scanner. You could do banner grabbing on that port scanner just to add a little more difficulty to that. But you just start figuring out that these are just socket connections, and you kind of learn the TCP protocol and UDP protocol that way, which is going to be very useful in internal engagement. So I think those are very good first tools, and that they offer some level of difficulty, but they also offer a lot of flexibility, and you can add things to it that other tools that might be more specific might be that's all you do is this one thing, right? So those are just flexible, good options, I think, for a
Right.
first tool.
Definitely. Yeah, I want to pivot a little bit over to certifications. Now, you and I, we both have our OSCP. You had an interesting OSCP journey, though, where there was a failure, and I tell people all the time on the podcast, embrace your failures. So if you can go into a little bit about the failure, but also how you succeeded in passing the OSCP, maybe some tips and tricks to give to the audience about how to go about studying for that major exam in cybersecurity.
Yeah, it was call me out. Let's see how it is. No,
Part
it
of my
was.
job.
I don't think it was a difficult exam. I really don't. I think I was unprepared. I also get very annoyed by hack the box type scenarios where it's just like you get on this machine, you're gonna find a password, and you take that password, and you go to another machine, they're gonna have a password. It's like that's just not how it works. And I think I get too tied up in this isn't realistic, and I don't spend enough time going, what are they asking me to do next? So the first test was very much me going like, this is stupid. Like I don't enjoy this. Like why am I doing this? Why do they call this the cert that I'm supposed to have when I'm already doing this stuff in real life? Like why? And so I just got frustrated, and I think I ended up just kind of going, I'll just get it next time. And that's really what it was. I think, uh, into the AD set a little bit, and then I got to the individual boxes, and I was just like, yeah, this is like, it's not for me. Like, I'm really mad about this. So I put it down for a little bit, and then I was like, I really should get this cert. And I came back to it, and I think the main difference was like my mindset, and it was more like, I know this is stupid. I know it's dumb, but like, what are they asking me to do, and how can I meet that challenge? Because I don't like failing things. I've never failed a test in my life, so it was the first time, and I was like, all right, this is a lesson to be learned. But yeah, that's pretty much what it was. Is I spent a lot more time the second time around in the labs than I did in the training. I also had a weird thing where like I did do all the training, and then I guess they changed the format or something like that. There was like grandfathered in as long as you took it within a month, and I didn't take it within a month because I had something going on. I don't remember what it was, but there was some gap there, and so I ended up they were like, well, you could retake all the training again and get your free 10 points or whatever and for the test. And I was like, no, you know what, I'll just go for the 70 points. I don't need your extra 10 points. Like I'll just get it done. So I spent a lot of time in the labs, just kind of making sure like I knew what they were asking for. I found the labs to be, I guess, somewhat challenging after a certain part. There was just like, you got all the points you really needed. Do you really want to keep going through this lab, or do you want to go to the next one and see if it's similar? Especially the ABC ones where they were like the old versions of the lab, that kind of thing. So
Totally.
just kind of like walking through there and seeing what existed and seeing what kind of things that they might be leaving behind as traces. And I think my biggest challenge was I'm not a web app person. So doing those, I was really focusing on, these are the web apps that they're presenting here. Like, what are the key concepts? Not like, am I going to see this box? Like, what are they asking me to do? Right. So a lot of SQL injection, that kind of thing. And I, being a programmer, I don't need the tool to do it for me. Like, I'll build my own script if I have to, if I'm not allowed to use, SQL map or whatever. That's not a problem for me. So it's more just like specifically, what is this SQL injection asking me to do, and what's it doing in the back end? And is this something they're going to ask me to replicate? And it worked out very well for me, because my exam the second time, I got through AD no problem, except for one little hiccup where I didn't cat the file and I just decided to open it up in the. Never mind. I don't want to give too much information. Cat your files, everybody. Cat your files. And
Goes back into the exam and says, "Oh no."
It was stupid, because once I figured out what it was, I was like, I could have passed this exam 9 hours ago. I just went to bed and I was like, I'll come back to it in the morning. But when I got to the standalone machines, like the first two I popped really quickly. And then I didn't get root on it because I was like, I'm not going to waste my time. Like, my goal with the three machines was, I'm going to get in. If I don't immediately see the admin way of getting in, I'm just going to go to the next one. And then if I sit there long enough, I'll just pick one of the three that I'm going to go for. So I got into the first one pretty quickly, didn't see an immediate path. I was like, I'll just go to the second one. I've got three chances. And I did that same thing with the second one. Then I got to the third one, and the initial access was actually difficult on that one. I was like, what is going on? It was probably the hardest of all three. It was just long. So I did get through it, but it was just a very long process, and it was very arduous. And once I figured out how to get on the machine, that one was very different. It was like, immediately I saw the root and I was like, I know how to get this. So that's how I popped those three. And then I went to bed, woke up the next morning, catted a file. I was like, oh. And then I finished my exam. That was it. I think my biggest recommendation is, if you're anything like me and you get annoyed with these certs, like, change your mindset. Just think about, like, what are they asking me to do? Care less about like the fact that it's a stupid exam. And then just again, pay attention to what it is you're doing in these labs when you do the labs, which I think are way more important than the trainings. And
I agree.
that I think that theory helped me quite a bit.
Yeah, the labs, especially the ABC, without a doubt, set me up for success on the OSCP. If they didn't have those labs, I don't think I would have passed my first try. They really make you not only think about what you're going to see on the exam, but they give you the methodology right then and there. Like, you don't have to do the course material. They give it to you on the OSCP A, B, and C. Now, they don't have write-ups. They don't have official write-ups. You can go onto their Discord and speak to people. So it's the small things that you overlook. You really have to just focus, look at all the different endpoints that are within the web app or whatever application you're looking at, whether it be, FTP or SMB or a web app in general. Once you can see and identify the specific area that you think you're going to go down, just hit it like a truck. There's definitely going to be rabbit holes within the certification exam. I've had plenty of rabbit holes. Matter of fact, I couldn't even figure out for the longest time one of the ways to get root on the standalone machines. And then it clicked and everything was working, but I was down a rabbit hole for a couple of hours. I think it was like 3 or 4 hours. I was stuck. I was like, I don't know what's going on. This should work, but they had the latest patch, I guess, and so I couldn't end up accessing it. So I completely agree. Do the labs. I also recommend Hack the Box. I don't know if you used Hack the Box for it. Hack the Box was a fantastic resource, at least for me. TJ Knowles List gives you a rundown of all the different kinds of OCP like boxes. You can go in, do them. They're all retired, so you're going to have to pay a fee for Hack the Box to get access to their retired machines. But it was a great learning experience. The only issue was the course I did not feel was very valuable. I thought it was a
Yeah.
little bit too easy, and some of the stuff was just a tad bit outdated. Yeah, they didn't really give you many techniques. They give you Nmap and then just put the IP. But they didn't give you additional parameters that maybe you could try out to make your scans a lot quicker, like what we did over at the small firm, where I was just doing Nmap with the IP and a couple of other parameters, and they showed me the arguments I needed to set, and all of a sudden my scans were going 10 times faster. So I wish they taught that on the OSCP exam, but unfortunately they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, within reason too, right? Like, if you're in a really small environment, it's probably not best to T4 that thing. Within reason, I think it's okay to increase the speed. And it wasn't just speed that I taught you either, though, right? So it's like, I think everybody tries to use Nmap like it's a hammer and it's a scalpel. And so my biggest thing was like trying to make sure that first of all the host is even there. Second of all, find the ports that are open, and then you can virtual scan. Like I'm not going to virtual scan 65,535 ports on 2,000 hosts. Like it's just not going to happen. So just I think methodology is important in that scenario. I don't remember if
Yeah,
that was the issue with you, but I do remember having to do something.
I'm assuming it was because I was a web app guy. So I didn't know what I was doing on networks. I was looking at it going, all right, whatever you say, and I would just kind of click buttons. But what would you say is one of the biggest network vulnerabilities that you're seeing currently on your engagements?
I mean, ADCS is a good one. I think we mentioned that already, or you that, or we talked about it beforehand. But ADCS, I see a lot. To be honest, I was just talking about this with my coworker. You don't even have to get on a box anymore in an environment. There's like some sort of misconfiguration. So my last test, I was able to get domain admin using a account that was Kerber hostable. Then I had essentially it wasn't a domain admin, but it had permissions over somebody that was a domain admin, or that was a domain admin. And so basically, I just needed to be able to get either their hash or their plaintext. And I was able to use the fact that I had a couple of like secrets dumps from like NTLM relay, sorry. And I started seeing a pattern in passwords. So I just started organizing the hashes and sorting them, basically trying to look for like patterns. And then I took the usernames that I found and I started spraying those hashes across the environment to see if they're valid for anybody else. And then I found that that hash was actually the same as this account, basically. So that gave me the confidence to try it without locking out the account. So I logged in with that and I found out it was that. And then I performed a shadow attack against them, like a shadow credential attack, and I was able to get access to that and get a domain admin from there. So I think misconfigurations is a big thing. It's not just ADCS, because ADCS is basically just misconfigurations, but that's the big thing. I almost never have to actually go onto a box anymore to get domain admin.
And did you use Bloodhound to see the attack chain, or just going at it and being like, hey, I think I know how to do this?
Definitely always use Bloodhound just because they want to see the alerts. But typically for things like that, now I like to use LDAP search a lot and like query groups and RPC for other enumeration tactics. But yeah, so like this one, I didn't need it. I usually just go open up Bloodhound for the screenshot to show that this belongs to this, which belongs to this, which owns this. It's got the nice little arrow. So it was like literally the report was like a square. And I was like, there you go. This guy is part of this, who owns this, who is a domain admin. So that's what I like
That's
Bloodhound for.
insane. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible what Bloodhound can find, especially with misconfigurations. I think they just came out with an AI model now with Bloodhound, where like you could just do a search and see if there's an attack specific for a specific user or a host or whatever it is. So things are getting kind of crazy in the network, side of things, but
Yeah, that and
it's a very cool
SCCM, I
tool.
think, is a big one too now. So my coworker, he always gets these ones. I never get the cool ones, but he gets SCCM almost every time. And so SCCM vulnerabilities and being able to abuse that, and he'll get some sort of password that exists in the system or in the domain, and it almost always ends up being a high privilege user.
And what is SCCM for people who don't know?
Uh, You'd have to ask it. I know a little bit about it, but not enough to be dangerous. So I stick to like pixie booting and like being able to post from something else in the environment. That's like my attack method. SCCM is a pretty big niche. I use the tools he gives me and I go, I don't know what this is doing. And he goes, you'll learn eventually. And I just don't use it again because I never get the same luck he does. So I'd have to do a little more research. I did read there's a really good article on it. And I felt like I understood it after reading it and then forgot everything I read. But there's a guy who did a talk on it at DEF CON. Pretty much anything you find written about SCCM and pen testing, you'll find if you just look up DEF CON SCCM, you'll find that talk, and he did a really good explanation of the attack chain and how it works. So that's something I definitely need to dip a little deeper into. But like I said, I never have luck anyway, so I never get the chance to really dive
Right.
into it. So
Right.
I've had luck
Maybe
with
you just
Pixie
have to try
Boots.
harder.
Yep, I've had luck with Pixie Boots. I've had luck with everything else. Don't ever use that term with me again. So I just stay away for SCCM. So
Yeah, that term comes to haunt a lot of us in OffSec. So I got to push your buttons a little bit, which is fine. So what exactly is your methodology when it comes to network tests? So let's say it's an assumed breach scenario. What's the first thing that you do?
always as responder. I just want to see what's talking and where it's going. After that, it's enumerating domain controllers. Then I like to see what kind of privileges I might already have. So while responder's running, all that stuff's running, I like to see, can I get into something for free? Is there any guest access on SMB shares? Good job, Vega. Is there any guest access to RPC, like bind, anonymous bind, that kind of thing? If you have any of that, you can get a lot of free enumeration. You can get a lot of users or groups, that kind of thing, which would give you password spray opportunities. If you have RPC anonymous and you have the ability to query users, you can a lot of times get passwords. One of my favorite things that I started with popping open RPC, find out I have anonymous access, ask for all the users, then I see the description. It's like, this user's password is this, and you have
Right,
free
of
access.
course,
I love that. It was
of
like my
course.
favorite thing. So I think my process probably isn't very different from anybody else's, but once I have all that up and I can see kind of what's on the network, looking for relay attack type things like NDNS, NVTNS, LLMNR. I like to first try to see if I can get a computer account in the network. So I'll usually let that sit for a while, see if I can forward over LDAP to a domain controller, get a computer account, which gives me just free access to the network. And then from there, I'll usually forward it to any hosts that don't have signing requirements to see if I can get like either a secret stump for administrative privileges, which I have less success with. Usually I have more success with just a SOX proxy, which you can still do the same thing with. So yeah, and then from there, just kind of making sense of everything I've found and seeing what I could do with it. And I would say in my current role, I've got one test I didn't get domain admin on, and I've had quite a few tests, and that my methodology has gotten me through all of them.
So it's pretty common to get DA on most, I would say, most environments.
Yeah, and pretty much everything I just discussed is like pre your first account, right? So like if you don't have an account yet, that's everything I would do to get an account. And once you have an account, it's pretty game. That's when game is on. As I tell all my clients, is like your goal is to stop me from getting any accounts, like no access at all. Because the second I get access, that opens up so many doors, and that's the
Right.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with ADCS, that's a very scary vulnerability.
ADCS, curb roasting, yes, rep roasting. I mean, there's a million things
Yeah.
you can do now. I can look at all these shares that you probably gave me access to because you thought I might need it one day for some reason. Yeah, there's just
Right.
many open doors.
Yeah, I mean the amount of clear text passwords that we found on SMB shares is incredible. PHI, PII,
Well,
or
Steve
personal
found one
identifier
with domain admin and
information.
FTP, didn't he? Isn't that what he said?
Did
You
he?
went into an FTP share and then they have domain admin creds for all the DA users in there.
I don't know if that's true, but if it is,
That's what he told
that's
us.
ridiculous. I don't remember that, but I'll take your word on it because to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
You think that you see it all when you're a pen tester. You're like, oh my god, I'm never gonna find something as crazy as this, and all of a sudden, the next test, it's like, nope, I found something crazier. It's almost like a disappointment. It's just so disappointing to see that companies can't just secure a little bit. Making sure that PII isn't in SMB shares or clear text passwords or whatever it is. I mean, it seems easy enough, but obviously, if you're a large corporation, it's a lot more challenging. If
But
you're a small business,
I think it's
you
usually
may not have the
evident.
best IT.
It's very evidentiary of companies that went from small to big, right? Like it's like companies that either were very small and then they got bigger, and then the person stayed on security and they didn't really understand GPOs and how to secure an entire environment using one controller. That's usually what that says to me, right? Because you'll see some people like a lot of times you'll see some S&P shares that require signing and some that don't. You're like, why is that? And it's because the person just didn't affect the policy across the entire environment. It's very indicative of somebody who just like had to expand and didn't know how. And so I think that's kind of where we come in. It's like hey, this person doesn't need to be fired; they need to be informed. I think that's all it is. Uh,
Right.
so
Yeah.
and I hate going to those meetings where you get in there and there's like always that boss. And you can just tell he's just looking for somebody to fire. I've done that a
Right.
couple of times where we got DA. You worked the same company as me, and there was like every year we didn't get this company, and then I got in there and we got real lucky. We found something big and get on the phone call, and he's calling in all of his vendors into this meeting, and I didn't even know it was going to happen. And he's trying to fire people, and I'm like, it's not worth all this. It's not
Yeah,
worth
I
it.
know that a bunch of the clients were also asking for the clear text passwords as well as the users
Mhm.
to bash them. I've never given up that information before to people, even if the client asks. Your password policy is the issue. It's not the user. The user just abuses your password policy. So, they're looking for someone to fire, like you said. And I don't know, have you ever done that? Have you ever
Yeah, I've
given
given passwords,
credentials?
so I don't have a problem with that. I think sometimes it can be a non-repudiation tactic where you just say, "Well, no, it's not my password," and then you show them, and they're like, "Okay, maybe it's my password." You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I think as long as the goal is to enforce change and then to kind of get a understanding of what your passwords look like, I think it is important after a test if somebody's actually willing to take down some time and look at it and say, what is my average password length? My policy says 11, but here all of these are 8. That's a really good indicator that something's not happening. Either these users aren't being forced to change their password, there's no expiration date, or they're grandfathered in, or they're not even part of the same, somehow they're not even part of the same domain, something like that. Something is happening that's preventing this change. And I think that is important. So being able to look at that and figure that out is important. The other thing I like to show when I do give those over is I like to show them all the ones that have their company name in it. Uh, that's my favorite thing. So I'm like, it's not hard to guess, right? Like you talking about RockU, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, what's your company name? MRE. All right, do I see MRE Security 2024 in here? Because it's so common, right? So
It
that's the
is.
ones where it's like I would almost rather have a filter against my own company name as a password because it's so easy to guess. And 9 times out of 10, when you do get one of those, it's almost always a service account, which is just way too privileged, and they just abuse, they abuse privileges because they would rather not restrict them properly.
And with the whole hash scene, you have been developing a tool having to do with hashes. Do you want to give a bit of background regarding that tool?
So I've got two-part tools. So there's one that's going to be on site, and there's one that is a public tool strictly for security professionals. So unfortunately, if you're not in this space and you don't have a security professional email from a company, you're probably not getting in. But the goal was to obviously have a place for all of your hashes to be stored and confirm against a giant ledger, and then B, to create ways to use the hashes that you provided and the clear text passwords that you've discovered and analyze them and come up with ways of guessing potential passwords for the next one. So it'll help you come up with potential spray targets. It'll help you come up with passwords based on keywords that you give it. It does its own defanging. So if you give it a line that includes the realm or the domain of the username, it's not going to say that when it comes out the other side. So it never stores that information. And just the whole point of it is, one, there's a community of people that love to do this stuff, aka me and like 6 other people. It's important because a lot of times, there's been plenty of times in my career where I've been stuck on a test and I have this hash and I can't crack it, especially, slow hashes, for example, like DCC hashes, right? Where it's just taken forever and it's a slog. So being able to have a resource of either just cracked hashes, the odds of you finding a DCC hash that exactly matches yours is low, but having a word list from something and then being able to put together a key list or a mask that might help them, which I think is really underrated. But using this website to do that, I think, was the goal for me. And so that's where that came from.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that a lot of people are going to use it. I've been part of the not really development process because I don't know how to develop what you're doing. I mean, what you're doing is way out of my league, but I've been there from really, I think, the beginning, ever since you bought the domain till now. So it's been a process. This has been going on for what would you say, about 2 years now, year and a half?
Yep. Yep, about
So
2 years, and right now we're feeding in hashes in the background. That screen that's slowly moving there. So I've got already about 600 million hashes in there, and we're still counting. And I've got plenty more to add. So yeah, it's about a 2-year project. It's hashcrack.ing. So like I said, you can go to the site, but if you're not a professional, you're probably not going to get in. It is going to be invitation only, just to prevent things like hash mob, where people go on there that might not have the best intentions, I guess, is the best way
intentions.
to put it. So even though I do think HashMob's a great site, I don't think it's private enough for me, and I would never put my own client hashes on there. And that was the goal with this, is being able to ensure that I defang these hashes is the first thing, and then also being able to limit the community that can use it.
And there'll be a link down in the description for you to go check out the website. Again, it's invite only, so don't try to hack it. But it looks like we're running out on time. Do you have any final thoughts to share?
I was thinking earlier when we were talking about, you were saying like all the cool things you get to do and you never get to do them again. I think one of my favorite things about this career, and I'll end on this one, is it's never the cool things I always want to repeat again. It's like things that I did once before and I've not done again that might be super lame, right? So my favorite attack of all time was an LDAP passback, which is super simple. And for those who don't know, it's when you get usually a printer that's domain joined, that's actually given like its own host name on the network. And you go to, you get in there and somebody left the admin as the password, and you look at the settings, you see LDAP and you see the domain controller in there. It's like, no, this is where I get all my information. And you just change it to your computer and then it sends over its password in clear text. So I think for me, like, my favorite part about this whole career is stupid things like that, where it's like, this is just such a dumb thing that it works. And I've never been able to do it again because, like, either I've gotten unlucky and I've just missed it, or B, people have gotten smarter. But I think that's my favorite part about this career, is just all the little dumb things that you'll find. And it's not a reflection of the company. It's just like funny, right? It's just small things like that. So but I think that's kind of what I want to end on, is like, I think this is a fun career. I think there's a lot of like cool little things to be had and things like that. Somebody had to find that at some point, right? So getting into this career, I think part of the programming conversation, and to kind of wrap up the whole conversation, is like, if you don't know how to program, you're not going to be able to find things like that. You wouldn't even know what to look for, right? So I think that's important. So
Definitely. I love our job. I think our job is awesome. I call it a hobby. I don't even think of our job as really a job. We get to hack things all day and find vulnerabilities and help clients secure their products or secure their networks. It's a great job. At the end of the day, we don't want threat actors to break into any sort of business, or we want to make sure that we are the people defending against these threat actors, which I think is the coolest thing. I mean, I would never want to do anything else besides cybersecurity, specifically penetration testing. I don't know if I could do the whole network thing. I used to do it, but not anymore. It's been a couple of years, so maybe I'll have to get back into it at some point. If you guys did enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It really does help me out with creating more content such as this. Evan, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. This was a great conversation, and please like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
later.